going to climb a tree.
Watch out.
Ah!
Hey everybody, Brian Henk from the Board Game Business Podcast. Thanks for joining us. The San Jose Protospiel just happened. So the three of us are all super excited about that. Jeremy organized the event. So this is where, if you're not familiar with it, a bunch of designers go, a bunch of playtesters go. It's a convention where you only play prototype games. So it's super valuable to the designers. The playtesters get to help create the games, give feedback on the games, make them better, see what's coming out that's new. So it's just an amazing event all around, and it went off without a hitch. What you're about to see is the panel from the San Jose Protospiel. So it had Aldo Ghiozzi of Impressions, so they're a game consolidator. It had Peter Vaughan, who is a developer with Breaking Games. Had, of course, Jeremy Commandeur, designer. He's now had a few games either published or in the process of being published, and he's the super backer on Kickstarter. Rodiek was the one who emceed the panel, and of course he's a publisher with Hyperbole Games. And lastly, Teale Fristoe of Nothing Sacred Games. Am I missing anybody? I think that's it. Well, me, I guess. I was on there too, but you don't care about me. So that is our panel. So we talked about everything about what our podcast talks about. Board game business. So design, publishing, getting your games into distribution, getting your games into retail. So lots of good stuff. Please watch. It's a little bit longer. I think it's about 90 minutes or so. But I think you'll be happy that you watched it. So, or listened to it, depending on how you're consuming this. So that's it. I'll see you on a future episode. It's going to be kind of more of a regular one next time.
So today we're going to talk all about game design and development, the ins and outs of it, everything ranging from Kickstarter to different player counts. If you guys have a question, I've got paper and pens up here for you to write it down and bring it to me, and I will ask it maybe if we get to it. But first, let's introduce the panel. Starting with you, Jeremy, and this is for all of you. Tell me your name, why you matter and you're up here, your favorite game, and what your design tenets are.
All right. My name is Jeremy Commandeur. I'm the organizer of Protospiel San Jose. Why I'm up here is I have a blackmail file on Grant. My design tenet is that simple games go farther and can go viral and sell more copies than more complex games. And my favorite game, right now, I'm going to say Birds of a Feather by Teale over here. I'm really enjoying that one.
All right, you're up, Brian.
All right, I'm Brian Henk, Overworld Games. So I'm a publisher, and I'm a publisher first, but I've designed a few games, Good Cop, Bad Cop, New Salem, and published a game by Jeremy here, Booze Barons. So that's our latest one that hit retail. So design tenets, our games are all social games. So we just want to bring people together. That's why people want to play games. I think they want to get together and have an experience, a shared experience. And so we try to create the most interesting shared experience we can. And so that's what we got. My favorite game is the Resistance Avalon, because it does that better than any other game that I've found. It stirs up emotions that a lot of other games don't. And so that's why I respect it and enjoy that game. Cool, you're up, Teale.
All right, hey everybody, I'm Teale. I guess I'm up here because I'm... Louder, okay.
Louder.
Hi everybody, I'm Teale. I guess I'm up here because I'm kind of a designer publisher that's experimenting with different models. So I've self-published several games, and now I'm working with publishers on some games, self-publishing other games. So I'm kind of experimenting with different ways of doing it. My favorite game, I really don't like picking that, but I'll say Tokaido, which I think is a really slick game that does a good job of capturing an aesthetic, both visually and mechanically. And my design tenet, well, if you play my games, you'll see that I have a very large range. I do all sorts of different stuff, but ultimately it comes down to player experience. So I'm trying to come up with some new and interesting ways to get people to get excited and connect with each other.
Great. Mr. Vaughan?
My name is Peter Vaughan, and I am a developer.
I'm a publisher, but I've just signed on to be director of development for Breaking Games. So my main mission is helping Breaking Games get all of their products into the marketplace and develop new ones. I also run the League of Game Makers. Actually, Teale is in the League of Game Makers as well. So it's a blog about design and publishing, mechanics, and a lot of other topics for game makers.
Finding a lot of good answers there. Yep. Should read that blog.
Yep. We do have about 300 posts so far, so it's doing really well. We do every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. And then it's leagueofgamemakers.com.
Leagueofgamemakers.com.
Yeah. And my favorite game of all time is Puerto Rico. I have played so many games of Puerto Rico, and it doesn't ever get old. And I've actually, from a design point, been looking at that, like, why doesn't that get old to me? It's just such a deep strategy. It's classic to me. But actually, my design tenet's a little bit outside of that. Breaking Games is trying to make games accessible. So right now, our biggest challenge is how do we get new gamers into the hobby? I definitely like what Jeremy said on the simplicity. Personally, I also like asymmetry. So that's what I want to throw out there as mine is I like variable player powers, and I like ways in which after you've played the game, you find out that, oh, you can play it again a whole different way.
All right, you're up, Aldo. So Aldo's a little bit different than he's a distributor.
Well, I'm not a distributor.
Oh, shit.
So we'll go from there. My name is Aldo. My company, Impressions, is a game distribution service company, actually. So we're really odd. There's only two of us that do what we do in the industry. So our job is to be hired and take care of getting games to distributors for game publishers. Ironically, raise your hand on this panel if I handle your stuff.
Or handled it at one time?
Or handled it at one time. So we get the games into the distributors so it gets on these store shelves. I was a part-time game designer in 1994, and I started doing this full-time in 2000 as a game distribution service. So, favorite game?
Yeah.
Wiz War, Tom Jolly.
Nice.
Not the Fantasy Flight versions, no offense.
He's also in the league.
Yes, Tom's in the league. He's Southern California, mid-California. And then game design tenet, since I don't really design anymore, I have to follow Jeremy in terms of market trends. Right now, the market trend right now, games that are selling the most are the lower price point, 20, 30-minute games, play really fast, talk really fast, can play again with large players, large groups of players.
Cool. So my name is Rodiek. I am sort of like Teale in that I am a hybrid published designer, but also a self-published publisher. I have Farmageddon and Hocus, which I've published under my own company, but then I also have a game called Cry Havoc coming out from Portal Games later this year, so I have a little bit of experience in both of those areas. And I also write a blog for the last couple years on game design.
Which is?
HyperboleGames.com.
HyperboleGames.com.
Cool. So I got some great questions from you guys. And I think some of these we can dive right into because they were some of my first questions. So I really like this one, and a lot of this will come from this. What is the best way to get publishers to look at my game? So, Jeremy, you've done a lot of pitching. Can you talk to this one a little bit?
Yeah, the best way to get publishers to look at your game, there's a couple different things you can do. One is at different cons throughout the year, if you can get into publisher speed date, that's my favorite way to get to publishers. So at Gen Con and BGG Con and Origins and Gamma, James Matthey and some other people run this thing called Publisher Speed Date. And I have a table, and I have 3 minutes to pitch my game. Publisher sits down, I do my 3-minute pitch, and they move on to the next one. And 20 or 30 publishers will rotate through that. Doesn't waste their time, doesn't waste my time. That's a good way of doing it. You need to have a sell sheet, a one-page visual resume for your game to do that. I've got an example gallery up on Flickr and Pinterest right now, and you can find that. Brian tweeted that. You can find Board Game Sell Sheet. You can find that there. And we did an episode on the BoardGame.business podcast on how to do that as well. The second thing I would tell you is going to cons is probably your best chance to catch publishers. And you probably want to pick a con that is not Gen Con. Because at Gen Con, they are swamped busy all the time. And it's harder to get meetings and harder to get time, especially if you're starting out and you're a nobody. So if you go to a less busy con, like Origins or BGG, or one of my buddies was at WonderCon the other week, you may be able to get more face time with that publisher to give them their sell sheet, give them their elevator pitch, the short version of why they would be interested in your game, and if they're interested, maybe arrange a time to sit down and do a demo.
One quick thing I want to add to that is that when you're looking for a publisher, you want to find a great partner that's going to make your game better, but you also want to find someone who would be interested in your game.
Yes.
If you're looking at someone's catalog, you generally know the types of games they're looking for. Brian only publishes social games with lots of players. Don't go to him with a 2-player head-to-head like Netrunner wannabe. And that's basically make sure you're finding the right game for that publisher and approach them, because if you show up and you're compatible already, that'll help you get to that, past that elevator pitch, and you'll start to show them the demo and such.
And I gotta add in for the business side of things. If you're, for the business side, you have to ask these people what do they want from you in the sense of how to approach them. You can't just bring them the game and say, I want to show you the game. You should either find out what their submission policy is, especially, and find out about making an appointment at Gen Con. Even if it is busy at Gen Con, you can still possibly get an appointment. So you got to do a traditional business approach to them as well to get that time to do that. And then hopefully the last thing I would add is every game should have a hook of some sort.
What makes this game special?
Why
do I care?
That breaks out, whether it's a license, whether it's a game design mechanic, a type of component. Tucker, who's presenting here, I just met him for the first time. He was showing me a card game, and I was kind of like, and then he said, the game's being printed in the propylene box, like the upper deck protector boxes. And I said, that's a hook. That's something different than just being in a paper tuck box. So have a hook.
A lot of publishers do want you to contact them in advance to get an appointment. Their contact information for the publishers who elected that is publicly available. And the other thing you can do is to get an introduction. So events like this are a great chance to network. And so like I signed a game with R&R Games, and there was another game, Teale had a game I thought would be a good fit for them. And so I introduced Teale to them because I had an established relationship with them through that network and had them try the game to see what they thought.
Do any of you other guys have other comments on this, or do you want to continue moving?
Another thing is just that publishers get pitched a lot of games. So just be mindful of their time, the publisher's time. I think you'll find that if you email a lot of publishers with your game idea, you're not going to hear a response. Especially if you do it and you give them a 10-page rule book or document along with it. They don't want to see that. They don't have time, and they're not responding because they don't like you, but they're responding because they don't have time to read the 10-page document you sent them. And they're like, well, maybe if I get to it, I will do it on an airplane or something, but it probably just won't happen. So just give them a 1-page sell sheet, like Jeremy said. Then I will know if I look at that sell sheet if there's any chance that it would fit for our line. And then I can just respond kind of very quickly, yes, no. So I think all publishers really want that. Just be mindful of that 1-page sell sheet, that's it.
So to sort of continue on this topic, which is kind of a nuanced difference, is what are some of the things I must do to get my game published? So a lot of this is about your responsibility as a designer, what you have to do to prepare for that. Teale, can you talk a little bit about that? And then Peter, I'm going to want to hear from you.
Sure.
Yeah, so can you repeat the question, please?
What are some of the things I must do to get my game published? So if you have the meeting, if you know the person you're going to talk to, what should you do ahead of time as a designer to make sure your game is ready? Like, how do you get your game there?
So this is getting it published through a publisher.
Yeah, it's basically, what are you going to bring to them? What's your designer role?
I mean, the first thing is there is the option of self-publishing, and so you can kind of do whatever you want to do that. But if you're going through a publisher and expecting them to actually take the game from concept to market, I would say that what you need to do is you need to think of it as a sale. So, if you have a great game, that doesn't necessarily mean that the game is going to communicate that, so the publisher is going to know automatically that it's great. And even if the game is great, if the publisher doesn't think that it's going to sell, then they're probably not going to pick it up. So that's kind of where the hook comes in. You need to be able to answer the question, why would anybody get this? And it can't be, my friends like it. It has to be somebody seeing it on the shelf and understanding something about the game and then deciding to get it for that reason. So a lot of it is presentation. I think that when you make your sell sheet, I think that one game that I've worked on recently is Trellis. One of the reasons I think that game got a lot of response from publishers was because it was very visual, and I didn't like put a block, like a wall of text on the sell sheet. The game kind of sold itself just from how it looked. You could kind of tell how it was going to play. You could see that if this was on the shelf, people would notice it. And so I think you got to sort of approach it in that way. Approach it as a sales pitch, and don't think of it as personal. Think of it as like I'm trying to communicate that this artifact that I'm creating is actually something you'd want. Not buying it from me directly.
So Peter, what are you looking for when people come to you?
Well, it's a good question, and there is, for breaking games especially, since we're doing so many games, we're seeing a lot of different variety, which is great. And, just so that I can give a little more history, Breaking Games is the publishing arm of Ad Magic, which prints Cards Against Humanity and Exploding Kittens. So one of the things I see all the time is a Cards Against Humanity-like game. I mean, I just see tons of them in my inbox. And especially for those, I need to know, it's not like we're opposed to doing more party games, but why would I pick that one when we already have, we're already actually releasing one this year called Keep Calm, which is it's like a variant with a way that you can interrupt the judge. So that had one angle that obviously got through to Sherry Spiro, who's the owner of the company. But in general, too, when you're designer speed dating, be prepared to defend and answer questions about your game. I had a designer, and he had a co-op game, and it was like Pandemic, but he had another angle to it, and I liked it. And I said, how do you dial up the difficulty? How do you dial up the difficulty in this game? And he said, you would adjust this, this, and this. And I said, great. So how does a 5-player play? And he's like, well, I haven't tried that yet. Well, I don't want it then. I need you to know every in and out of that game. And Seth Jaffe wrote for the League of Game Makers recently that there's a trend to just hand off a game and think the publisher's going to run with it completely. And he was defending. He's a developer for Tasty Minstrel Games, and what he was trying to say is, you need to take this baby home. You need to do a lot of the work to make sure that at this market, you're going to stand out and show a publisher that you're providing a very valuable resource, which is a complete product, a complete design that they can take and make a home run.
Yeah, there's a difference between handing them just an idea, which will never happen, versus handing them something that you've really kicked the tires on, but it still might have additional development on it. My design, Cry Havoc, I started in 2012. I got it signed in 2014, and it's going to come out this Gen Con in 2016. It's been in development for 4 years. I had 2 years of tests before I even got it signed, and then it had 2 more years of development on it. So I did a ton of work. The framework and the foundation is still there, but a ton more work went into that. So I didn't just hand them that kernel, but I handed them something that was very, very solid, robust, had been really through a lot of fires, and then we made it better. Your publisher should help you make it great. They're not going to make the game. Anybody else have any comments on this, or want to move to something else? All right. So this is kind of a fun, quick side one real quick that I'm going to give to Aldo. Do you see a market for single-player board games, Aldo? Do you have a story on this?
Gosh, yes I do, Grant. My answer would be no, categorically. There's no market for one-player games whatsoever, and I was completely wrong. The trend has been a lot of games have done 1 to 2 players, 1 to 4 players, where there's a one-player option to it, and that really, in my opinion, sales-wise, wasn't really that big of a factor. But then AJ from Van Ryder Games comes to me and says, I've got this game, it's one-player only, and it's called Hostage Negotiator. And I go, send me 10. Just one-player only, that's it. And surprisingly, it done extremely well. Multiple print runs right now. We're sold out again on it. It's got expansions on it. So that is a blip, I guess you could kind of say. It's a fun little story where I said no way. For the most part, though, I just don't see one-player only games selling.
The problem with a lot of one-player games is that there's a really good alternative, which is video games. And that's not meant to be mean or snarky, but you can play a crap ton of really, really good video games by yourself that don't require setup and all that other things. One thing, talking to Portal, Ignacy Shevicek from Portal, he's been adding a lot of single-player variants. So like Imperial Settlers has a 1 to 4 player variant. Robinson you can play by yourself. There's a couple other things, and he said he's seen a slight uptick, but it's not like massive. But
I'd say so. I backed more than 300 board games on Kickstarter, and games that have a solo option get a marginal increase in backers. Because there are people out there that'll tip the scales for them. Like, oh, I could play by myself, even when I can't get it to the table with my buddies, I'll jump in on this. So it's nice to have, but I wouldn't count on it being a market of just doing a one-player game.
Yeah, I think there's going to be a slight increase because as you find people who want to unplug from their phone and they want to play something, there's a great way that it could increase, but I do think that part of tabletop is that social interaction, so therefore it's probably not going to increase that much, I would say.
Do a one-player legacy game. That hasn't been done yet.
A one-player legacy, I like it.
So this is sort of interesting, so we have a lot of bloggers here and a lot of people have done different things. How do we make sure that if and when we do a Kickstarter, we're well enough known? So I'll just start with this one. My sort of tactic on this was to just put my time in on the community, get involved in Twitter, get involved in Facebook communities, come to conventions like this, and also I've been writing a blog for 3 years. Like these guys, I have over 300 articles on there, and at the very least I can point to that, and it helps establish authority on the topic at hand so that people can at least see, oh, he's put his time in. So a lot of it is just putting your time in and getting to know people. There isn't really a lightning fast answer, like sure you can buy Twitter followers, but that's not really going to help you much. What would you guys say is a good alternative to getting well known? Brian, what do you think?
So I guess if the question is really when am I ready to launch, is that kind of another way to do it?
That's another way to look at it.
Yeah, so I guess I would agree, just build a following, but I think the most important thing is when you go through the playtesting, find a way to, and yes, come to these conventions, get it playtested as much as possible, but find a way to capture that so that you can let them know when the campaign goes live. And so that would be like having them give you their email address if they'd like, and you have to be careful not to be too pushy about it or anything, but if they like the game and they want to know when it becomes a real thing, and it might be years down the line, then they can give you their email address, and then now you can just email them and say, hey, you playtested this game, we're finally doing the Kickstarter campaign, and then if you have 200 of these people who have a good chance of backing you, they know you, then I think that's a good time to know at least you'll have a few of these people to get you started. But there's so much else that goes into it, the preparation of the presentation of the campaign and getting it out to reviewers, and just there's so many channels of buzz that you can kind of go after, and so you need to do as many of those as you can. The more you do, the higher the chances that you'll be successful.
One quick add-on to that, he's talking about a newsletter essentially.
Yeah.
MailChimp.com is a free newsletter service that you can use,
MailChimp is good.
It's a great way to reach out to people once a month just to say, hi, here we are, here's what you should try. He just said a couple of those other things, but you want to have 2 or 3 previews. You don't need 50, but you want to have 2 or 3 outside people validating and reaching out to their audiences. You want to start reaching out to podcasters. Those are people who will have an audience, and there's big ones like On Board Games that have thousands of people that follow them. Teale, do you have any advice
and not during your campaign.
No, you want to do this ahead of time. For the
you have
Hocus,
to build the crowd before you launch.
For the Hocus campaign, we reached out to our previewers 6 to 8 months ahead of time, just to say, hey, in 6 to 8 months, I'm going to be doing this. Are you on board? Are you with us? Teale, do you have any things you would like to add to this?
Yeah, I would say the biggest thing is that it's a slow process, and you really can't rush it. It comes down to making individual connections to people, and as you're coming up to a Kickstarter campaign, you really want to make sure that you have that momentum coming into it. So you can't expect people to discover it mid-campaign. You really have to expect to have enough support on the first and second day that momentum can bring you to the end. You can't expect to find that momentum mid-campaign. You're going to have trouble otherwise.
And you have...
MailChimp.com. Chimp, like a monkey.
Like a monkey.
Yeah.
So for anybody who showed up new, we have pieces of paper up here that you can write questions on, and just bring them back to me if you have any questions you want to ask. Yeah. Any of you other guys have anything you want to add?
I was going to add something to that, which is the newsletter works for whether or not you're going to do Kickstarter or not.
Yes.
For example, Luke Laurie is a designer in California. He runs his own newsletter and will occasionally update his projects, which seems a little bit silly when you're not publishing, but at the same time, it keeps everyone up to date on what he's doing, and I think it's good for anyone. When I ran my Kickstarter for What the Food, my wife and I did a Facebook group for What the Food, and we updated that every day with an interactive type question. And we did that for 4 months prior to the launch, and that was not even enough. We could have done 6 months or a year prior.
So you built your crowd in advance before you launched.
Right.
And doing that kind of thing as a designer, too, to build your own crowd, if you pitch to a publisher, that's valuable to a publisher, too. So, I mean, it's great if your name is already well known and you already have games published, that's great. But there are other things you can do to kind of build your resume, too. Jeremy talks about building your designer resume, and I think that's very valuable to a publisher as well.
Also, I just want to make an invitation to the crowd. If you have an article that you have an idea for a game design or mechanics-based article, you're welcome to email me at the League of Game Makers. We take guest posts, and we'd be happy to put out some other, feedback. It's great to, if you do that, find an angle to what you're working on and why you think that's an interesting angle for people to read. 1,000 words with some pictures, we're happy to post stuff like that.
One thing I really want to point out, the TLDR of a lot of what we're going to say up here is put the time in to develop your craft, put the time into network and learn things. Don't rush into any of this or else, it'll only bite you. So I really like this question. I think this is something for all of us to pitch in on. Is it important for your game to have a compelling theme when pitching it to a publisher? And is it okay to pitch a game with solid mechanisms but no flavor yet?
Ooh.
And I'll let you guys start off, but one thing I'll quickly say is, remember when I said make sure you pitch to the right publisher? Aaliyah will probably care a lot less about your theme than Fantasy Flight would. But Jeremy, why don't you give us a start about what you think about theme development?
That depends on the publisher.
Yes.
Some publishers do not care about theme, and some do. Some publishers don't want to see an abstract. If you have an abstract, that's the wrong fit for that publisher because they're heavy into theme.
Plaid Hat would throw your game away.
Plaid Hat, Portal, others might say, no, there's not enough theme here that doesn't fit our market and our lineup. Other publishers do care about theme. They may want to throw it out and change it. So I signed 3 games in 1 year, and 2 of the publishers said, we're going to change the theme. We don't like your theme. We're going to throw it out and do a different theme. So it's good to have that theme to give the game the feel, but keep in mind, there's a very real chance your publisher will not like that theme and will want to throw it out and do a different theme.
Teale, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, the main thing that I would add is that your theme can be one of those main hooks. And if that's the case, then it's good to have a pretty coherent theme and make sure it comes through. But yeah, like Jeremy said, you always have to have the possibility that a publisher is going to just get rid of it and retheme it. And a game, when you're pitching, there might be some publishers that won't even consider an abstract game, but a lot of them will at least consider it, and then if they want a theme, they can put it on themselves later. So I don't think a theme is a prerequisite, but for a lot of games, it really is a big part of it. In my personal design process, sometimes I'll start with a theme. Oftentimes I will not start with a theme. I'll start with a mechanic idea, and then quickly I will discover a theme that fits that mechanic well, and then that will really help flesh out the game and communicate the game to players. So even though I could, keep it abstract, it definitely helps with communicating a lot.
Yeah, one thing I would add is if you're generally asking about, do I need a flavor for my mechanisms, there's sort of a distance between flavor and theme. This is sort of a personal bugaboo of mine, but flavor tends to be art, what the name you put on it, flavor text, things like that. Theme is often, do my actions as a player actually, am I doing what a pirate would do in this situation? Am I a space fleet commander? Am I a business tycoon? And so not all games need to have a strong theme, and then having that flavor that you thought through will help your publisher sort of get a vision for, can I see this on the shelf? Because not everyone has a vision for it. But thinking through those pieces, not every game needs that, but sometimes it'll help it. But, Catan is not a very thematic game. It just isn't.
Can I completely disagree with all of you guys?
Please.
Okay, so I completely disagree with all of them. I'm answering from the business side. I'm a numbers guy. I see sales numbers and what restocks and that. So from that answer, if it has a dragon, an alien, and or an explosion on the cover, I will sell more copies.
That's flavor,
it.
though.
Well, no, that's theme. If it's a fantasy theme, sci-fi theme, it'll sell more, most likely.
That's my semantic stickling.
Well, okay.
Dragons versus aliens.
I do
Dragons versus aliens, kaboom.
I want to add
For the most part,
something.
in the hobby game market, in our gaming geek market. I know the party game market. We're not going to talk
Anything else, guys, or we're going to shift gears?
I did want to add something really quickly as far as what Grant said about flavor. Do not spend thousands of dollars on the art and pitch that to a publisher. That would be a very bad idea.
Yes, don't
do
spend significant money on art if you're going to go to a publisher. Because the publisher has a very good chance of throwing all that art away, and that is lost money.
Yeah.
So use some clip art, get some cheap art. Don't spend money on art if you're going to go to a publisher.
What are some resources you recommend for people having good placeholder presentation art, Jeremy?
Absolutely. TheNounProject.com, game-icons.net, Daniel Solis's Patreon account. Those are all good places. The national, what is it? We have these listed on the board
Archives,
game. The government has digitized all the art in the National Archive, and you can use all that for free. And now, like the London Metropolitan Museum and the New York Metropolitan Museum have digitized their collections and put them online for free as well. So use those stuff instead. The National Gallery of Art, that's what it is.
So, I have one. This one's near and dear to my heart. How do you develop complex, balanced strategy games? I love stuff like this. I think this is up your alley, Mr. Vaughan. Or do you want to start?
No. I was going to say you should answer that. You should help me answer that.
I think you have the most complex strategy games here.
Yeah. Let's start with Mr. Vaughan, and then I'll go next. All right. How do you develop advanced strategy for your games? How do you add a skill component so that people can get better at your games?
A skill component in the game itself, right? Is that what you're talking about? Okay. That's an interesting question. I think that out of the games that I've put out, I'm going to look at those for example. I made a game called What the Food, and I made a game called Letter Tycoon and Boomtown Bandits, and each of those has a luck element and a strategy element to it. I really think that for the strategy element, giving players the ability to control their destiny in the game and find out, for example, if you take Letter Tycoon has, you're spelling words, but then you have a choice of what you'd like to buy. There's obviously a lot of dice in Boomtown Bandits, but one of the things that makes that have some strategy is which location you want to go to adds different powers and so forth. And I think that if you want to roll in some strategy, one of the things with Letter Tycoon is I wanted to add a lot more powers, but we waited till we had a base game that was working, and then at that point you look at what player feedback is saying people want to do, and then you can add some of those as auxiliary powers and ways to make it go deeper. And What the Food, my example is that I had a handful of 7 powers that you could do when you first started the game, and it was overwhelming people. And so what I did is I took those and stuck them inside the deck so they come out gradually and you find out what else you can do. So I definitely think with strategy you want to be emergent and not complex up front.
I think a big part of developing strategy is developing games where players can play each other. So it's not just them maximizing probability, it's not just them optimizing a path, but it's a way for player skill so that my choices can change my destiny and my path. I think dynamic play really helps, and I guess it's sort of that different players can modify board state so that you have to react to things that are occurring. I think sometimes, and there are counters to this. For example, I think Concordia is both one of the simplest games I've ever played that is also incredibly deep and strategic. Concordia. It's by Mark Getz.
Yeah. It's a good game.
Gertz. Mark Gertz.
I don't remember who it was.
One of those. That game is shockingly simple, but also crazy deep. What I tend to have found with my own designs, and this may be how I go about things, but I tend to find that I have to turn the knob a little bit away from accessibility towards complexity, which means that it makes that first game a little more difficult, but it means that once you play that first or second game, the third, fourth, and fifth games will be more interesting because there's a few more knobs and there's a little bit more freedom. For example, in Farmageddon, the original version came out about the same time as a Game Right game called Big Fat Tomato Game, and they're actually very similar in a lot of ways. In the Game Right game, your turns are very rigidly structured in that you draw a card, you have to play a card, you have to do this, you have to do that. And I need to stop hitting the table, I'm sorry. In Farmageddon, you could do all sorts of things on your turn in any order, however you want. That is a lot more complicated, but it also means that player order and how you go about your actions changes things. So I sort of twisted the knob on complexity to allow for it to be a little more open. That probably hurt my sales somewhat, but then again, maybe it helps my retention and long-term play. I think the other thing about this is sort of what he said is you need to balance against a really solid framework. It took us a year to get Hocus to the actual design, and then we didn't change the core design for the next year that we developed it. And then we spent 8 or 9 months just testing balance and just modifying wording and numbers and tweaking. And a lot of that comes from just playing the game hundreds of times with a lot of different groups.
Hundreds of times.
Yeah. So I'll add to that too, because I go about it a completely different way. Our games are more social games, but what I do is start out with something simple, and then I just watch my playtesters. So when people are playtesting, playtest as much as possible, and then just watch what other people are doing, what they enjoy doing, what they don't enjoy doing, what strategy do they want to do? Do they want to start building boats and having a boat strategy, or do they want to build their armies and do a land attack strategy? And I just watch what they want to do, and then I give them that, and I give them as much of that as I possibly can. And when they don't like paying taxes or feeding their people, I take that away, and I don't. If they don't like doing it, I'm going to take it out of the game. So that's how I approach it, just watching playtesters and giving them what they want.
To sort of complement what Brian said, I think a lot of it comes down to give your players interesting tools that they can make decisions against to have a very sort of emergent game.
I'd say, so can I shoot the moon in my game? Can a player shoot the moon in this game? Something you could ask yourself, is there a way to shoot the moon, the strategy that almost never works, but you really want to try because it's wacky? And if you're familiar with the theory of Magic players, of Johnny and Timmy and Spike, what's Johnny going to want to do in this game? What is Timmy going to want to do in this game? Is there something for Timmy to do? Is there something for Johnny to do?
Can you explain that?
Sure. So there's this, I think the better thing would be to look it up. So there's theory of different Magic players. This comes with TCGs, the way different people like to play games. Spike likes to win. Johnny wants to win, but not whatever is the most popular strategy. If everybody's playing red, Johnny gets no Johnny gets no satisfaction from winning with red. He wants to win with blue. And Timmy wants to do something cool. He wants to build Exodia from Yu-Gi-Oh! Or he wants to shoot the moon. He wants to do something wacky and crazy and cool because that's what he wants to do. That's what makes the game fun for him. So can I shoot the moon? Is there something for Johnny? Is there something for Timmy?
To feed off this, Mark Rosewater is the lead designer developer for Magic the Gathering. He has a really good podcast called Drive to Work where he talks about design and such. His topic is usually Magic, but even if you hate Magic, it is a really, really good podcast, and it's about 30 minutes or so. It's called Mark Rosewater's Drive to Work. It's very good.
And if you Google Spike, Johnny, Timmy, you'll get the theory that explains. It's a good theory to start thinking about strategy in your game.
So, anybody else on that one? All right, so we're going to dip into Kickstarter a little bit. And again, for some of the people who are here new, if you have questions, I've got paper up here. Feel free to write it down and drop it off. So, what expenditures need to be accounted for when running a Kickstarter? So, Brian, let's start with you.
Oh, yeah.
Wow. There's a lot. Do your research so that you know what they all are. I couldn't possibly hit them all right now, but I guess some of the big ones, you're going to have to print prototypes. You're going to have to buy art. You're going to have to ship, even just shipping your prototypes to people who are playtesters or shipping them to reviewers. You're going to have to pay for reviewers, the big reviewers, to review your game, or send it to those who do it for free, but they won't have as much of a following. You have to pay for the manufacturing of your game, the shipping to every single backer, which can be immense, especially if you're unfamiliar with how to do fulfillment to backers. You have to ship your games to...
What did it cost to ship Good Cop, Bad Cop on your first printing, and how many did you ship? Just for your Kickstarter.
How much to make it and to ship it?
Just to ship, just to fulfill it. So it's in your warehouse. How much did it cost to mail it to backers?
We had... how many backers did we have on that one? We'll say 500. So 500 tuck boxes. See, that's a kind of a... I don't know, it's not the best example because it's such a small game. That's not too bad because I can put that into a bubble envelope, first class mail. I did it myself, so you can save money if you do that yourself. So shipped them all to me, and each one is just, really it's only a couple bucks, but you got to buy envelopes, you got to buy stamps, so there's a lot of fees.
I got the answer because we just looked at it. For Hocus, we shipped 1,700 copies. They fit in a small padded mailer. I did it myself. It was $8,000.
Teale should answer this one.
Yeah.
$8,000 for shipping.
$8,000.
And that's just the fulfillment, right?
That was just fulfillment.
So you also have to send all those copies into distribution or your warehouses.
You have to pay for the shipping
Amazon
from China.
warehouses.
You got to pay for the shipping container from China too.
That's about $900.
Don't forget about that.
Give or take.
I'll just say that for my first game, Corporate America, I broke down all of the costs for making the game and for running the Kickstarter and everything. I did a blog post about it and explained, everything that I had to pay for and how much it cost, and
it's really good.
And it's very good. And that game lost money, right?
It ended up, for the Kickstarter. So the Kickstarter did not pay for all of the expenses that I needed to actually get it out there. The game ended up making money in the end, but that was after a long time.
And that's for retail and such.
Yeah.
Which takes time because you may only sell 100 copies, 200 copies a month.
Yeah.
Where do I find that blog post?
So that's on my blog, which is NothingSacredGames.com.
NothingSacredGames.com.
If you Google Nothing Sacred Games, cost money, it should be like the first result that comes up.
I'll say that we just did a 20-minute podcast on this very recently for the Board Game Business Podcast, and James Matthew has a high-level overview of what you need for your Kickstarter campaign, like a checklist, and that's worth looking at as well.
Also, the Kickstarter will take 10% of what you raise. So if you raise $30,000, they're going to get $3,000 of that. You also have to pay sales tax to Uncle Sam.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you wouldn't expect, so it's worth looking at the experience of somebody who's already done it.
Yeah, so ask existing publishers.
Yeah, a lot of people would be happy to just talk to you about it. Maybe not give you exact numbers, but at least tell you what their experience was like.
Anything else here, guys? So while we're on Kickstarter, we'll just go a little more. I think this one's an interesting one because this one has probably differing opinions. How do you decide on the goal amount for your Kickstarter?
Do you set a real goal?
No, but Kickstarter is a game, by the way.
Yeah, Kickstarter is a social game, and you need to pay attention to the ecosystem of Kickstarter.
One of the most fascinating ones that we saw come out in a couple of years ago, history, is that Game Salute priced every game at $5,000.
Yeah.
And everybody knew, or at least I thought everyone knew, games do not cost $5,000. So what was that? That was them saying, we're going to print it anyway, but we want something that we know people will hit. It's not a bad strategy, considering that if you put $25,000, backers will say, I don't think they're going to make it. I'm not going to click the button.
What's very interesting about Kickstarter is that you don't pay unless it funds, but psychologically, people hate backing a loser. Like, they don't want to have their name, for whatever reason, associated with a project that does not fund. Oftentimes, you want to have that mailing list, that core audience that is going to show up and fund your game in 24 hours, 48 hours, and then the browsers will start seeing that, this is actually a successful thing. Sure, I'll jump in.
Yeah, I think for a lot of Kickstarter backers, a big part of it is the excitement of the campaign itself. And if they come to a project that's 5% funded with 2 weeks to go, they're going to know there's no chance that it's going to hit. And so they're not going to get that excitement. They're not going to get that edge of their seat. This is going to fund and we're all a part of it. So they're not going to do it. So yeah. There's definitely a balance between actually getting the money that you need and realizing that there is a realistic amount of money you could possibly get, and finding that middle ground.
One of the fascinating stories that I think happened to a friend of ours is Christian Strain, who did Asking for Troubles, right? I don't know if anyone's familiar with that one, but he asked for $50,000 and he got $35,000. This was actually his first game, I think, Evil Intent, where he asked for $50,000 and he got $35,000. Then he asked for $35,000 and he got $50,000. So, granted, you take some risks there. So, with the last question about cost, never ever put something out there that is going to cause you to go into financial ruin if it doesn't work right. But when I was launching What the Food, it was anxiety if I couldn't get it at 9 or 10,000, because I knew that 15, 18 would start to lose people. And then what I did is I carved the game down to be a $9,000 game. I actually pumped the number up to 12,000, and then when we hit 12,000, I knew we could make it. And then after that, we got to 22 because we had room to encourage people to go for the extras.
I guess I'd like to add just one more thing real quick. This is a perfect example of every publisher, every Kickstarter creator out there is going to they have a different background, and when they say something like, this is how I do it, or this is how you should do it, just make sure that you know it's from their perspective. And what I do is going to be different than what anybody else does. And so, I mean, I look at many different campaigns and get as much feedback from other creators as you can, because like for us, I want to make sure that I set my funding goal based on how much I think I'm going to get in the first weekend. And I'll be honest about that. It's way less than what it's actually going to cost me to make, but I also know that I can make it up later, and I think other publishers and creators can't say that. So they can't take that risk where I can. So I don't do what I do. Don't do what anyone else does. Make sure you understand why they're doing it, or get all the facts for yourself.
Yeah, we've done this panel. This is our third year to do it, and there are a lot of these questions that are asked, and I think sort of what he just said is the best answer, which is that there are literally thousands of Kickstarters out that you can look at what they did, and you can even compare your game to theirs to see how a similar game does. There are hundreds just this year that you can look at to see how the ecosystem is now.
You can go to boardgamedata.com, and Roger, a friend of ours, has built a scraper that scrapes Kickstarter and pumps all that data in. So you can say, well, what percentage of Kickstarters that have an early bird reward at this level wind up funding? And you can look at a lot of that board game data and make some decisions based on that.
But the original question was, how do you reach your...
How do you set your goal?
Was
it a real goal or a fake goal?
So I'm just saying, so what about hard data points? The top three would be cost to print, shipping, and what, art, layout, design?
Are you going to print the game regardless? So I can set an unrealistic funding goal, 5K, the Game Salute goal, because I'm going to print this game anyways.
Yeah.
And if I haven't done the math correctly and planned it out correctly, I might lose money on this. I might be in the hole. Or maybe I set a lower goal because I plan on being in the hole initially, like corporate America, and then I'm going to make that up in retail stores as sales over time. Or I can say, you know what, I'm going to set a realistic goal. I need 40 grand for this game to break even.
Yeah, I think that's the basic answer. We have to, all these tricks about rewards and all that, that's later.
I set a goal for 40 grand, if I don't get 40 grand, I don't do it.
Kickstarter. What is it for the cost of goods from the printer? What is it to ship it from China and ship it to backers? And then the art, layout, and design of the game. Those should be your top three for the most part for these expenses.
And if you don't know what cost of goods are, you should go look that up before you do any of this.
COG.
Hashtag business major. All right, so this is a question I really like. How do you find enough playtesters who aren't just the same group of friends? Jeremy, do you have anything to say about this?
Absolutely. So coming to an event like this is a big deal. You want to network with other designers, and so that you play their games and they play your games, and you go to their game night and they come to your game night. Meetup.com is a great place to find other board game meetups in your area and go there. And then you need to go there with positive karma. So just don't go there and say, hey, play my game. Go there, teach people how to play the hot new game that you got a copy of. Teach people how to play some other games, build some positive karma, contribute to that group, and then say, hey, you guys willing to try my prototype and try that out? And so you want to be able to do that. I'd say traveling to cons. So like PacificCon's going to have a prototype area in it this year. That's a good way to do it. Taking your game to cons and getting different crowds that way is a good way. You may want to see if you can get a Pin Pal prototype buddy where you mail them a copy of your game and they mail you a copy of their game, and you test each other's game and do video feedback or audio feedback for that. And that can be very useful as well. And then there are two services that will do that for you. Game Crackers is one of them. You can go to gamecrackers.com or their Facebook group, and you mail them a copy of your game, and they'll play it and give you remote blind feedback for it. And then Kiva has another one she just started, and I don't remember, but it's we'll be talking about it in the Board Game Business Podcast, or if you email me, I'll send you the link. That's another remote blind playtesting service that you can use as well.
Does everybody know about the local conventions that are here that you can pre-reg your games, put them in their catalogs and books? Do you guys know about PacificCon, KublaCon, DundraCon, the Conquest in Sacramento. Those are all local game conventions in Northern California.
Sac Anime.
Sac Anime, yeah.
Huh?
Sac Anime.
Oh, Sac Anime, okay. And you can get your games into their catalogs, into their websites, so you have a slot and a table just like here. Jeremy, don't you have your thing once a month?
I have a thing once a month.
Is that like open? Should I not have said that? Sorry.
No,
Conventions.
So I'll explain how it works. The one I run is referral. So anybody's welcome to come, but someone has to vouch for you.
Okay.
So someone who already comes has to vouch for you, and then you get in. Because I don't want jerks. I don't want people to show up and don't play anybody else's game and expect everyone to play theirs.
But your best play testers are unknown people, giving it to people and letting them run with it. And conventions are a great place to do it. So,
Do you guys have any other tactics?
Yeah, I'm going to try one out recent. I decided to go to my local board game cafe and put up a players wanted sign, and the cafe said sure, and that's getting some people just outside my circle. I think that works sometimes.
Yeah.
The other guys have any others?
When I was playtesting corporate America, I was doing some pretty wacky things. I put up flyers at a game store. I posted to Craigslist. Got some really weird responses. But I also
I'll test your game.
I also got some, that said, I got some good playtests out of it. And I think the internet, going to Board Game Geek or posting on Facebook groups or whatever, there's definitely people who are interested in trying new games and interested in getting involved in the process. So you can probably find some people that way too.
Something I've been doing lately is I have I'm involved in the Twitter community, Board Game Designers, and I'll sit there and say, I will mail you a copy of the game if you'll try it. And I'll even bribe them with games. I have a couple who's played my game 6 or 7 times over the last 3 or 4 months, and I just sent them a $50 game that they told me they wanted. I was like, what do you want? And I just mailed them a game. So that starts to get expensive, but it's also worth it if you find the right people.
Yeah, I know, I don't think he's around, but Ed Baroff is here at the con, and for one of his recent games, he has basically made a deal with people online that if they playtest the prototype like 10 times and send in forms giving feedback or whatever, they will get a copy of the game when it funds on Kickstarter. So there's kind of this process where people can earn their game by just playtesting it. And I think part of that comes with reputation. Like if you just say that to people online, they're going to be like, who are you? But he's done a couple of games, so he has that. He has enough to sort of like get
It's
that.
also helpful that once you have a game or 2 or 3, you could say, hey, here's our new one, and you've liked our other ones, and that's where, again, MailChimp newsletter comes on, because you can release print files for folks. Anything else on this one, guys? All right, so here's another one I really liked, and this is sort of a fun, speculative one. What do you see as future board gaming trends? Aldo, we're going to start with you.
well, we started at the beginning. We talked about games that take less time to play, 20, 30 minutes, easy to teach, $25 or less price point. Those are definitely the ones that are helping to move more numbers, move more volume. I would say the second trend, I think it's parallel to like how the movie industry is actually. It's all about sequels. People just are like, wow, I like Red Dragon Inn. Oh, look, there's another Red Dragon Inn. I would rather buy that than a new game.
Red Dragon Inn 6.
Red Dragon Inn 5 just came out.
Munchkin, Smash Up,
Munchkin,
Love Letter.
Smash Out, all those games, Settlers of Catan, whatever it is, all those games that you see more and more expansions to, though people tend to want to give their money to something that they feel more confident about than some strange thing reading on the back or reading a review. So that's the trend that I see. 2 trends that I see.
I hear single-player legacy games are going to be big, so keep that in mind.
Legacy games are going to be
Single-player.
Single-player legacy.
legacy games.
Mr. Vaughn, what do you have?
No, I really agree with Aldo actually on the. I'm trying to make all of the breaking games titles accessible, and I'm trying to do that with 30-minute to 45-minute timelines, and Board Game Cafe ready, so super appealing, and you've got a new crowd of people coming into the hobby. If you look at Board Game Geek, the site, versus Board Game Geek, the Facebook group, Board Game Geek, the Facebook group is a bunch of people saying, I haven't played a game before, what should I play?
Yeah.
And so you're going to see themes, not to disagree with Aldo and Dragons, but you're going to see, Teale's putting flowers and birds and other things in his games, and you know what? There's audiences out there going like, I actually want to play knitting, or I want to play a game with birds, and so I think you should look at the bigger audiences coming in, and explore that.
Birds with machine
I really want to
guns
drive in on that. Is you're seeing a huge period of growth in board games. There's more publishers. It's with online and more stores and cafes. There's a lot of people around the world, and the industry's growing. And you see more heed being paid to the Spiel des Jahres, and you're seeing a lot of companies like Asmodee, Days of Wonder, and Fantasy Flight, which have really big, exciting games. And you're even seeing better games in Target that aren't just Monopoly. Like Pandemic is there, and X-Wing is there, and there's a lot of really great things. And so with that huge influx of new players, they're looking for stuff to play. Rules are the single scariest thing and the biggest barrier to entry for board games versus video games, movies, books, all that other stuff, TV. Think about how you're competing for people's time. And if your game does not require, a ton of money to play, because they just got in the hobby, they're not sure if they want to spend 60 yet. If your game does not have pages and pages of rules, think about when you first started to learn. We all have sort of a muscle memory. I had a friend the other day who was teaching me Chaos in the Old World, and I've played area control games, and I've played war games, and I've played asymmetry games, and halfway between every sentence, I was like, I got it, and I didn't even have to know the full rules because I just knew how it was going to work. But new players don't know all those things. So if you consider that they don't necessarily know what draft means, so you want to prepare yourself to catch the wave of all these new people coming in. But I would sort of argue on the other side is make sure that your game has a sticky point that's a reason for them to keep playing it more than 2 or 3 times, because whereas a lot of us buy 2, 3, 4, 5 games a month, we are the absolute extreme exception. Most people buy games on their birthday and Christmas, and that is it. And so make sure your game is one that people are going to bring to game night all year round.
One thing I'll say, this question was kind of about like where is the industry going or where's the hobby going. I think it's always a good idea to not like be too slavish to the past and like keep an open mind, because we really don't know where things are going. And you could come up with the next idea, but it's probably not going to be looking at what's popular now and tweaking it a little bit or something. It's going to be coming up with something new and interesting.
So to continue on that, this isn't a question asked, but something that I found that's helped me and a lot of other designers is finding a way to twist an assumption that people have in games and change how that works. A game that I think it was nominated for the Spiel des Jahres was Augustus, and that game is literally bingo with a couple mechanisms tied onto it. It's called Sapiens, I think, from Aiello. It's essentially dominoes with a little twist. Dominion, he took the deck building mechanism from Magic the Gathering, but was like, what if you do this during the game? So a lot of great ideas come from finding assumptions or old ideas and finding a way to twist them and make them interesting.
I think experiential entertainment is growing a lot right now. And then you see that's a lot of investors are investing in is experiential entertainment. The entertainment I experience and I don't do in my own home necessarily. So board games are riding on that. And that's why board games are growing 10 to 20% a year for the last several years. And what kind of experience does that game drive? And as more people get into the hobby, they're casual players. They're not the bearded Euro player playing the 2-hour game, and they're not the TCG Magic player anymore. This is the casual player playing Exploding Kittens. And so is my game accessible to them? And will they have an experience in that game that they can then tell a story about so that game can go viral? Because that's what's going to get it to another person. So I think that's the trend that I would look for in the future.
Anything else on this? All right. So these two are sort of tied together. One is comments on children's games, and the other is, and this is wise, as a publisher, how do you define the age rating on the box? So just sort of simply...
Put whatever you want.
Yeah, well, so it's one of those things that it is a regulatory body in the U.S., and I'm going to speak at sort of high generalistics about that. It's a regulatory body. Like the IRS, they're not going to necessarily look under every single doormat and check every single thing, but if they do, and you're wrong, it is a very costly, difficult, and expensive thing to go back and correct. As you go lower and lower on age ratings, you need to be way more precise about the components you have, choking hazards, things like that, but you also need to do more rigorous testing.
Chemical testing
with the facilities to ensure that the components are safe, and that could be thousands of dollars. And I got to tell you, thousands of dollars can make or break whether you make money or not, especially as a new publisher, when you may literally make 1,500 copies, and if you sell those 1,500, that's a really good start.
So question to the publishers up here, how many of you guys have certificates for your games? From your printers, manufacturers? How many people have certificates?
I didn't even know you could get
You
that.
get a certificate for testing.
You can, if you're willing to pay
And
for
that's
it.
how you break into the mass market, because those mass market people want to make sure you have things like that. Walmart, you need $1 million liability insurance, and you need to show them that before Walmart will consider carrying your game. What are the chances of your games being carried by Walmart? Pretty low, but if we're talking children's games, that tends to be more of a mass market. A great website for that aspect of the gaming industry, if you're looking for the young people, is discovergames.com. That is run by a woman named Mary Kudzen. Mary owns the Chicago Toy and Game Fair, Chicago Chai Tag. I was trying to say Chai Tag. Chicago Toy and Game Fair, and discovergames.com. She tends to deal on the educational children family side. She's a great resource, you know, so that's what I would say to that.
I have an opinion I'll toss out, which you said comment, so I'm going to go with it. Generally speaking, and there are exceptions to everything, but generally speaking, children's and family games on Kickstarter don't do very well for a couple reasons. One, that's not really the audience. The audience is young, you know, web-connected millennials, just to sort of, again, speak generically, but it's people who are connected to the internet, do a lot of their shopping there. One of the problems with children's games is that parents are looking for something that's comfortable to them, that looks appropriate. They're looking for price. And if you go look at a Game Right game where they print 50,000 copies of each print run, and they've got Dr. Oppenheimer's Award, Parents' Choice Award, Mensa Award, they come in a beautiful tin box, and they're $11. It's very, very hard to compete with that because you're going to lose on price, you're going to lose on familiarity. They're going to be at Barnes & Noble, Target, Walmart.
And all of those mass market people expect your price to be parallel to those big companies. So
they're not even going to take your game off the shelf if you cost $4 more.
Did anybody see those Paco Gum games?
Those are cool,
Chris
yeah.
Handy.
Yeah.
They're $5.99 retail. We represent him. They should be $1.99. I went to Target and they laughed at me. They're just like $5.99. This is ridiculous. Call me when it's $1.99. You know, they just said we won't even look at it. So that's the big difference when you're looking at children's games, because you're getting into a mass market category as well, for the most part, not categorical. Obviously, some children games can sell here, but for the most part, that's mass market talk.
But that legal requirement, if you put under 12 on the box, you are now in the danger zone of the government coming after you if you haven't paid for that chemical testing.
Right.
So that's the big red flag there. If you put under 12 on your box, you're in the danger zone.
And it's slightly different for Europe. So for Hocus and Farmageddon, I just put 14 plus. I think it's really 10 plus, but I don't want to deal with that. And frankly, I'm a very small, very niche publisher. I'm not going to sell to parents right now. I'm not going to have that reach. So I just did 14 plus. And that was sort of my doing away with it. Did I say
Otherwise, you're
anything wrong or
classified as
crazy?
a toy,
No, it's
and the
self-imposed.
regulations for toys kick in. But if you're 14 plus, then you're in the adult range, and those standards don't kick in.
I'm an adults-only publisher.
You do have to look at, if you put 14 plus, but you are essentially falling into a toy category, you should read all the text from the European Union, because you could actually be considered a toy even if you've put 14, and so you could have a problem.
Anybody aware of, do you guys put the CE mark on your games?
Yeah, we just talked about this on the Board Game Business
Okay,
podcast.
CE mark is the self-imposed mark that you put. It's for Europe to get you basically approved. You know, if you type CE, it's, what is it? Certified Europe, I think it is. I can't even remember what it's called, but it's a self-imposed mark. You don't have to sign anything or pay for it. You put it on your box and it says, my game follows these rules, and it's a European Union thing. So if you look up CE mark, it'll give you all the definitions out there. But like Germany, for example, sometimes will not take in games unless they have a certificate and a CE mark, especially in the mass market.
We just did an episode called What Goes in the Back of the Box.
Yeah,
We talked about how to
great.
get a UPC code, how to get the CE mark, the testing requirements, and how all that works.
Excellent.
Awesome.
So we have about 20 minutes left. So again, if you just came in and you have a question, I've got paper up here for you to come write questions, and I'll bring them up. So something here that I have a little bit of experience with. Is it a good idea to submit a prototype to a site like the Game Crafter? Does the Game Crafter increase your exposure to publishers? I think basically no. You can use the Game Crafter for sending prototypes that are nice. There's also drivethroughcards.com. There's
And
also
Print and Play Productions.
Print Play Productions. Andrew Tolson's over here, actually, and they're a subsidiary of Ad Magic. And then there's Printer Studio, has nice cards, but they're pretty expensive. The thing about the Game Crafter is there's no barrier to entry, and there's tons of games on there. It's almost like the App Store. It's a very good comparison.
But I was going to ask on this question, is it saying put it in their marketplace, or is it saying use them to make a prototype?
I would use them to make a prototype, absolutely, because if you show up to a publisher with a game that looks like this, they're going to be like, why did you just waste my time? But if you have something that looks like you put a little money into it, you put a little time into, like, again, GameIcons.net, free, and spending $20 on a Game Crafter prototype, that actually goes a long way just to, it's like wear jeans and a nice shirt to your meeting, don't show up in shorts and a Hawaiian shirt. Those little things go a long way towards just, I'm real, I actually care. But
I'm going to say, if you put it on the Game Crafter, it's probably not going to help you, but it's probably not going to hurt you either. If you somehow become one of their top-selling games, or get a bunch of accolades, or win one of their contests, then it may help you. But that's one of those things has to happen for it to help you. And it's not really going to hurt you either.
Yeah, and I would also toss out there that I don't think this is super common, but again, know the publisher you're targeting. Some publishers will say they do not want games that have been on Game Crafter, or they don't want stuff that's been exposed like that before, because then there may be early reviews or early opinions. The worst review for Farmageddon is actually from a publisher that asked me to send them a copy from the Game Crafter, and they reviewed a prototype version from 2 years before it actually came out, and I think they gave me a 2 or a 3. So just be aware of some of the ramifications and things that might happen, and yes, they're on my death list. There's one question here, sort of similar. Is there a directory of printing services out there for board game designers? Again, Print Play Studios. They can print pretty much anything. They're great for a lot of custom components. The Game Crafter is good if you're making a game with board, tokens, components. Printer Studio, basically cards only, kind of expensive. Drive-through cards, cards only, great quality cards, and fairly cheap.
Are they asking?
And if you're asking for manufacturers, that was the other side.
Directory of mass printing. James Matthey's blog.
Yeah, go to James Matthey's
James
blog.
Matthey is Mathe.
There's a ton of manufacturers,
but there's a ton. Just ask any one of these guys where they have.
It would be horrible if I didn't mention that Ad Magic is one of those manufacturers and can print anything.
That's a conflict of interest.
We'll do amazing work.
Hey, they're a sponsor. They can do whatever they want.
Yeah, they sponsored.
There will be no self-promotion on this panel. This one's sort of interesting, and this sort of, I think, is how do I make money? My late show comment to that is you don't. But that's why I'm following up. But how much money per game does the designer make? So, Jeremy, you've signed a few contracts. Tell us about this.
Yeah, all right, so it's going to depend on the size of your publisher, the contract, and the size of your game. So if I'm selling a micro game, that's not going to make anything.
And a micro game being like a $10 game.
Yeah, like a $10, $20 game, 18-card game. If I'm selling a big Euro game, then that might have a higher margin, or it might have a bigger box, and I might make more. Then, am I going to get an advance, like an upfront payment, and am I going to get a royalty percentage, and what's it going to be? That might be as low as 2%, 4 to 8%.
Wait, 2% of the MSRP, 2% of the cost of goods, 2% of the wholesale
price.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Or sometimes you do it the sale price. So the game sells for $50. Sometimes you get a lower percentage off of that price, or you might get a higher percentage off the wholesale price.
All mine were wholesale. So let's say I get 5% of wholesale, which is roughly half of retail. Right? So if it's a $20 game, and it sells for $10
wholesale's
in wholesale.
$8. 60% off.
Okay, so
60% off.
So
then I get 40 cents.
$8 times, let's say 5%. That's not a lot of money.
Right.
But so if you get signed then with a smaller publisher like us, we might we might give you a bigger chunk of the profits because we know we're not going to sell as much. So if we only sell 1,000 copies of a game, we want to make sure you get a higher percentage. But if you go to a bigger one, if you get Fantasy Flight to sign you, then you're going to get a very tiny cut of every sale.
And your contract may be structured so you get an upfront or you don't. So one of mine signed, I got an upfront of $1, but I get a slightly better percentage. And then, like Matthew structures his contracts, so the designer makes nothing unless the game is profitable, but then you get a higher percentage. And if the game is reprinted, it goes up. And one of my contracts is, if the game sells through its print run and gets reprinted, then my percentage goes up.
And that also means that, if you have multiple printings, that helps you amortize some of those costs like art and graphic design that are some of your fixed costs that are going to hurt you up front. But if you can do 2 or 3 printings, it doesn't hit you as much over time. And also, as you said to me, retailers and distributors are going to be more willing to buy a game that is already selling because they're going to want more of that. Because if they know they're going to sell 3 of these a month, they're going to stock 3 of those a month, and they're going to keep doing that as long as they can. Some other things that might affect your contract is digital rights. And again, this is probably for a bigger publisher, but if they make an app version, what is your percentage of the app revenue? There's also, if they do international versions, so with
foreign language rights.
With my game license to Portal Games, I have a contingent that I get for when they license it to a German partner, a English partner, or they're the English partner, but different languages and things like that. So there is a lot of this that you want to think about, and you want to have this clarified in your contract because it gets sticky to modify once it's written.
But for the most part, these big publishers have their standard contract, for you to look through. They're not gonna steal from you. I mean, it's pretty standard. Just go over it, read it, ask other opinions of people of other publishers you've met. But if you do get a contract from a big guy like a Steve Jackson or Fantasy Flight, whatever it may be, they do it all the time, and they have their standards, and you're not going to be able to negotiate much.
And again, study your publisher. Look at someone who's going to be a great partner for you. Look at people who have games out that you like, who have been good to their customers, who have been reliable with their product, and they have good art. Don't sign up with chumps. It's just, you don't want to hang out with people that you don't like.
We have a resource in the audience for this. Right over here is Zachary Trebek, the board game lawyer. So if you've got these legal questions, there's someone to talk to. You can see his website and his podcast, Legal Moves, to learn more about this stuff so you know what's going on.
Woohoo! So a quick one here. Differences between Indiegogo and Kickstarter?
This one weirds me out. The board game audience is on Kickstarter, right?
They're not on Indiegogo.
Yeah, they're not on Indiegogo. That is where the audience is. But Indiegogo lets you keep the money even if you don't fund. So if you're not sure you're going to make it, you could do Indiegogo, but there's not as many eyeballs there.
I would also toss out that, at least in my circles that I talk to, Indiegogo generally has a skeevy vibe. People are like, why are they here and not on Kickstarter? And it's just that thing of Indiegogo, they get the money no matter what. Kickstarter, they don't.
What's interesting is on Indiegogo, you can run a Kickstarter-like campaign where you don't get the money unless you hit the goal, but people just assume that you're going to get the money no matter what.
It's sort of, the brand is established.
Yeah, basically.
Viability for 2-player games. Brian, why don't you talk about this?
Viability? Whether
2-player only game?
A 2-player only game is
This
viable.
is your expertise?
Yeah, that's my expertise. Yeah, it is. There's an audience for that, definitely. A lot of our games don't go down. We're doing our first game that goes down to 2 players. First one out of our first 5. This is the first one that goes down to 2. And we've heard about that from a lot of people. Why don't you have a game that I can play with my wife? That kind of thing has come up. So yeah, there's a big market for it, but I am far from an expert on that. Maybe Grant, do you have more on that?
Peter, your games, Breaking Games titles, how many 2-player ones do you have, and how often do you get feedback that's what people are playing them as?
I would say that we don't have too many of them because of the party style of beginning that we had to the company. My game, What the Food, when I first made it, I had a 2-player. I was trying to get down to 2-player, but that was me being in denial. It really wasn't a 2-player. I eventually put 3 to 8 on the box. I was very excited when we made Letter Tycoon, which actually plays really well for 2, because I do think there is a market, and a lot of people have told me, I just want to play with my significant other, and I think it's important. But I wouldn't ever take a game that's not 2-player and make a fake... What I hate is opening a box. I used to play a lot of games with a buddy at lunch. We'd open what we thought was a lunch game. It says 2 to 4, and we find out that the 2 is just a manufactured game where it's like you add an NPC or you make all these modifications, and I'm like, no, I don't want that. So I think there is a market for strictly 2. Personally, myself, I enjoy ones that are, a good range and they're balanced for all the range.
Aldo, are you allowed to comment about 2-player sales versus
Well, yeah, I mean, the trends for 2-player games tend to be lower price point, shorter games, and I usually just see, and this is more anecdotal, is that I just see that they're games that when you have a game night and you've got 6 people coming over, the host has the first person come, let's play a game while we're waiting. Or it's late and everybody goes home and there's 2 of you that want to stay. That tends to be it. But that, again, that's just more anecdotal. But Pixel Tactics, I'm going to put a shout out to that one from Level 99. We sell gajillions of that.
Love that game.
Pixel Tactics 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Deluxe. And we just sell it endless.
You got Resistor from Level 99.
Level 99 has Resistor, and Cell Swords is also another 2-player only. They call it their Duelist line. So they're making games specifically for 2 players called Duelist line. Anyway, tend to be lower price points from a sales dynamic.
Just to add to this, I think if your box, whatever player numbers your box says should be accurate, sort of to continue on what he's saying. Don't make it a lie. Like, it's better just to say 3 to 5 if 2 is just really weak. Like, you're probably not going to make a great 2-player auction game.
I just want to say one thing about 2-player games. I think 2-player games can be great, and I think that there's a big market for them, but I think you're kind of putting yourself at a disadvantage when you make a 2-player only game, because games with bigger player counts can be played in more situations, and also whenever they're played, they're advertising to more people.
Yes.
Because everybody who comes in and plays the game is going to get exposed to it. 2-player games, I have a 2-player game, I want to play it with this guy. We're the only ones who are learning about the game.
And you already own it.
Yeah, exactly. So it's only one new player at most.
One more chance to sell that. Yeah.
So if I can bring in a bunch of people randomly, then all those people are getting exposed to the game and have an opportunity to learn about it, buy it themselves, and then continue to spread it.
I would say
there's a place for 1-player games, but
I agree.
I'm like you, 2 to 6 players.
Yeah.
If your game goes to 4 and you can get it to 5, it'll hit the table so much more often without one extra player.
My game group is so locked out on 2 to 4 player games. 5 people
it just
show
doesn't
up.
make it to the table as often because you want that. Well, yeah, this one extra guy. What do we? This goes to 5. It hits the table.
Getting Hocus to 5 was one of the best things we were able to accomplish towards the end. I think we're pretty much done. I got 2 questions towards the end here. Is there a market for purely cooperative games? Yes. Pandemic Legacy.
Dead Man Tell No Tale.
Yeah. Co-op has done very, very well, and I think right now
Pathfinder, the Pathfinder co-op card game is printing money.
Also, just so that you've got that new audience that's coming in.
Pathfinder, the card game.
Share a game and not have the game be against everyone.
They don't have to attack each other.
And this goes back to that children's question.
Casual players like co-op games because they're not cutthroat. And that's where the market's expanding. That's why co-op is doing well, because casual players like co-op.
So thank you guys for participating. We will post this probably somewhere, video and podcast. Come ask any of us questions except for Aldo. He's got things to do.
No. No.
Thank you so much for attending.
Hey, this is Richard to remind you that you can check out our website at boardgame.business. Old episodes are indexed by subject to make finding an answer to your question easier. You can find links to our BGG Guild, other networking sites, and, if you feel like supporting us, our Patreon account. Donations are used for equipment to improve the presentation of our podcast. Thanks for watching or listening.
Thanks so much for watching the Dice Tower videos. Find more great videos and reviews, as well as our top-rated audio podcast at Dicetower.com. You can also find other great shows at Dicetowernetwork.com. I'm Eric Summerer, and you've been watching The Dice Tower. The Dice Tower is sponsored by Cool Stuff Inc., where you can find great games for great prices. Cool stuff in stock. Check them out at CoolStuffInc.com.